The stars looked cold and empty through the broken window of the Zilani ship called Harmony's Light. Captain Vexithara pressed her thin fingers against the glass and watched her breath fog in the air. The heating system was failing just like everything else on her ship. 3 days ago, they had been a happy crew of scientists exploring a new star system. They were looking for rare crystals that could power their home world for 100 years. The Zilani were peaceful people who had never known war. Their world was green and safe with gentle animals and plenty of food for everyone. Now half her crew was dead. The Korthax raiders had come out of nowhere like hungry wolves. Their black ships were covered in spikes and weapon ports. They attacked without warning and without mercy. The raiders wanted the crystals that the Zilani had found, but they did not care if they had to kill everyone to get them. Vexithara walked through the damaged corridors of her ship. Emergency lights flickered red and yellow. Broken glass crunched. Under her feet, the air smelled of burned metal and fear. She could hear her surviving crew members crying in the safe rooms where they were hiding. Her communication officer, Zindar, met her on the bridge. His large eyes were wet with tears and his hands shook as he worked at his broken console. The poor young male had never seen violence before this week. None of them had. "Captain, the raiders are still attached to our hull," Zindar said in a voice that was barely a whisper. "They are cutting through the armor plating on Deck 7. I think they want to board us and take prisoners." Vexithara felt sick. She had heard stories about what the Korthax did to prisoners. They were a cruel species that enjoyed causing pain. They would torture her crew for fun before selling them as slaves in the dark markets of the Outer Rim. "How long before they break through?" she asked. "Maybe 2 hours," Zindar replied. "The emergency bulkheads are holding, but not for long." The captain looked at the communication panel. Their main transmitter was damaged, but the emergency beacon was still working. If they sent a distress call now, the Galactic Council peacekeepers might hear it. The Vorthak were gentle plant-eating people who always tried to solve problems with words instead of weapons. They were slow to respond, but they always came to help those in need. "Send the distress signal," Vexithara ordered. "Use the emergency frequency. Tell them we need immediate assistance." Zindar's fingers moved quickly over the controls. He was a good officer, and he knew the proper procedures. The distress beacon would automatically include their location and the nature of their emergency. Any Galactic Council ship in the area would receive the message and come to help. "Signal sent, Captain," he reported. "But something is wrong with the frequency modulator. The transmission might not be going exactly where we intended." "What do you mean?" Vexithara asked. "The damaged circuits are shifting our signal by several decimal points. Instead of reaching the Council peacekeepers, the message might go to a different part of space entirely." The captain felt her heart sink even further. If their call for help went to the wrong place, they would die here alone. The Korthax would break through their defenses, and that would be the end of everything. Far away in another part of the galaxy, the distress signal traveled through the darkness between stars. It passed by empty worlds and dead systems. It flew past the territories of a dozen different alien species who might have helped if they had received the message. But the signal was aimed at a small blue and green world that most of the galaxy tried to ignore. The people who lived on this planet were new to space travel. They had only left their homeworld a few decades ago. Most aliens thought they were primitive and backwards. The truth was much more frightening. Earth was what the galaxy called a death world. It was a planet where everything was trying to kill everything else. The gravity was crushing. The weather was violent and unpredictable. Huge predators roamed the land and sea. Even the plants and bacteria were dangerous. The humans who lived on Earth had survived by becoming the most dangerous predators of all. Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison was sitting in his chair on the bridge of the UES Valiant when the alien signal reached them. It was a quiet night, and he had been reading a book about old Earth history. The story was about ancient warriors who never retreated from battle even when facing impossible odds. The communication console suddenly lit up with flashing lights and warning sounds. Petty Officer Lisa Chang looked up from her station with surprise on her face. "Sir, we are receiving a transmission on an unknown frequency," she reported. "The signal is definitely alien, and it appears to be some kind of emergency broadcast." Jake put down his book and walked over to the communication station. He was a tall man with dark hair and calm eyes. He had been in the Earth Navy for 15 years and had seen combat in 3 different star systems. Nothing surprised him anymore. "Can you translate it?" he asked. "The computer is working on it now, sir," Lisa replied. "The language is completely unknown, but there are mathematical patterns that suggest intelligence. Also, the signal strength indicates the source is relatively close in galactic terms." The translation matrix worked for several minutes before producing the first clear words. The alien voice was high and musical but filled with terror. "This is Captain Vexithera of the Zalani research vessel Harmony's Light. We are under attack by Korthax raiders. Our weapons are destroyed. Our engines are failing. Many of our crew are dead. We need immediate assistance. Please help us. Please." The Prism message repeated several times with additional technical data about the ship's location and condition. Jake studied the information on his screen. The aliens were clearly in serious trouble. They were outgunned and outnumbered. Without help, they would all be dead within hours. "Sir, what are your orders?" Lisa asked. Jake thought about Earth Navy regulations. First contact with alien species was supposed to go through proper diplomatic channels. There were procedures to follow and paperwork to fill out. The bureaucrats back on Earth would want to study the situation for months before deciding on any action. But people were dying right now while politicians argued about rules. "Navigation plot a course to those coordinates," Jake ordered. "Maximum speed. And wake up Colonel Dan Phillips. Tell him to get his Marines ready for combat operations." The Valiant's engines roared to life, and the ship leaped forward into hyperspace. Behind them, Earth grew smaller and disappeared. Ahead of them lay the unknown and a crew of aliens who had sent their cry for help to the wrong species. They had asked for peacekeepers and diplomats. Instead, they were about to meet humanity. Captain Grackmore of the Korthax raider ship Bloodfang was having the best day of his life. The Zalani vessel was full of valuable crystals and rare metals that would make him rich beyond his wildest dreams. Even better, the crew was completely helpless and afraid. Grackmore was a large creature with thick gray skin and sharp teeth. His species had evolved on a harsh world where only the strongest survived. The Korthax had learned long ago that it was easier to take what they wanted than to work for it. They were pirates and raiders who terrorized the peaceful species of the galaxy. "Boss, the cutting torches are almost through the hull," reported his Lieutenant Vaktar. "We should be able to board their ship in another hour." "Good," Grackmore growled, with satisfaction. "Make sure the boarding teams know I want some prisoners alive. The slave markets pay extra for exotic species, and these plant eaters look very exotic indeed." The Korthax had been raiding for decades without serious opposition. The Galactic Council peacekeepers were weak creatures who preferred talking to fighting. They would send diplomatic messages asking the raiders to stop their illegal activities. Sometimes they would impose trade sanctions or other peaceful punishments, but they almost never used real force. This made the galaxy a perfect hunting ground for predators like the Korthax. They could attack merchant ships and research vessels without fear of meaningful retaliation. The worst that would happen is they might have to move their base of operations to a different star system. "Sir, we have a new contact on sensors," called out the tactical officer from his station. "Small vessel approaching our position." Grackmore barely looked up from the treasure. Inventory he was reading. Probably another council ship full of bureaucrats who want to negotiate. How long until they arrive? "At current speed, maybe 30 minutes, sir. Ignore them. We will be finished here and gone before they work up the courage to actually do anything." Useful. This was exactly the kind of thinking that had made the Korthax so successful. The peaceful species of the galaxy were predictable in their responses. They would send warnings and ultimatums, but they rarely backed up their words with action. Even when they did fight, their weapons were designed to disable rather than destroy. Grackmore had no way of knowing that this particular ship was different. Very different. The UES Valiant dropped out of hyperspace with a sound like thunder. The space around the 2 alien vessels suddenly twisted and bent as the human ship's exotic matter drive created ripples in reality itself. Emergency alarms began screaming on both ships as their sensors tried to make sense of the impossible energy readings. Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison looked at his tactical display and felt his blood turn cold. The scene was painfully familiar, from his years fighting pirates in the outer colonies. A large predator ship was attached to a smaller victim like a parasite feeding on its host. "Red alert, all hands to battle stations," he announced over the ship's intercom. His voice was calm and steady despite the anger building in his chest. "This is not a drill." The bridge of the Valiant transformed into a weapon of war. Armor plates slammed shut over the windows. Weapon systems came online with a deep humming sound. The gravity compensators adjusted to combat settings that would let the crew function during violent maneuvering. Lieutenant Amy Foster looked up from the tactical station. She was young but experienced, having served in the Martian border wars. Her fingers moved quickly over the control panels as she analyzed the enemy ship. "Sir, I have a full scan of the raider vessel. They appear to be using plasma-based weapons and conventional armor plating. Their technology level is roughly equivalent to our ships from 50 years ago." "What about the victim ship?" Jake asked. "Heavily damaged, sir. Life signs are weak but present. The hull has been breached in multiple locations and they appear to be losing atmosphere." Jake studied the tactical display. The situation was clear enough. Pirates had attacked a helpless research vessel and were in the process of looting it. The victims were going to die unless someone intervened immediately. "Communications, try to raise the raider ship," he ordered. "Channel open, sir," reported Lisa Chang. "Unknown vessel, this is Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison of the United Earthship Valiant. You will immediately cease your attack on the damaged ship and withdraw from this area. This is your only warning." The message was transmitted on multiple frequencies using the same translation protocols that had decoded the Zilani distress call. Jake did not expect the pirates to surrender, but he wanted to give them one chance to avoid what was coming next. On the bridge of the Bloodfang, the communication caused a moment of confusion. The translation came through as a series of harsh sounds that somehow conveyed absolute certainty and barely controlled violence. "Some primitive species thinks they can order us around," Grackmore laughed. "Show them what happens to people who interfere with Korthak's business." The raider ship's plasma cannons swiveled toward the human vessel. These weapons could cut through asteroid metal and had destroyed hundreds of ships over the years. Grackmore was confident that one good hit would be enough to send these newcomers running. "Fire all weapons," he commanded. Brilliant streams of superheated plasma lanced across space toward the Valiant. The energy bolts were moving at nearly the speed of light and should have been impossible to avoid at such close range. But when the plasma reached the human ship's position, it found only empty space. The Valiant had moved with impossible speed using thruster technology that violated several known laws of physics. The ship twisted through space like a living thing, dodging between the plasma bolts with room to spare. "What in the seven hells?" Grackmore started to say, but his words were cut short by the human response. The Valiant's main railgun fired once. The tungsten projectile was only the size of a small rock, but it was moving at 12% of light speed. The kinetic energy was equivalent to a small nuclear weapon, and the targeting was absolutely perfect. The shot struck the Bloodfang's primary weapon array and vaporized it instantly. Secondary explosions rippled along the hull as ammunition stores detonated. The raider ship's entire forward section was gutted in less than 2 seconds. Before Grackmore could even process what had happened, the human ship fired again, and again, and again. Each shot was precisely aimed to disable rather than destroy. The engines were crippled. The remaining weapons were eliminated. The communication array was severed. The armor around the bridge was peeled away like the skin of a fruit. In 30 seconds, a raider ship that had terrorized the outer systems for years was reduced to a helpless wreck drifting in space. "This is Commander Morrison to Korthak's vessel," came the transmission. "Your weapons are destroyed and your engines are offline. Surrender immediately and prepare to be boarded, or we will target your life support systems next." The tone was polite and professional, but it carried an unmistakable promise of death. Grackmore stared at his ruined bridge in shock. Half his crew was dead or unconscious. The ship's systems were failing one by one. Emergency lights flickered in the smoke-filled air. He had been in hundreds of battles, but nothing had prepared him for this. The human attack had been faster and more precise than anything he thought possible. These strange aliens had treated his feared raider ship like a helpless target in a training exercise. "Sir," whispered Vaktar from his damaged console. What are your orders? Grakmore looked at the tactical display showing the human ship hovering nearby like a patient predator. He thought about his reputation and his pride. He thought about the Korthax code that said death was better than surrender. Then he thought about the terrifying efficiency of the human weapons and decided that living as a prisoner was better than dying as a fool. Signal surrender, he said, quietly. Tell them we will not resist boarding. The age of easy piracy in this part of the galaxy had just come to a very abrupt end. Captain Vexithera could barely believe what her damaged sensors were showing her. The unknown ship that had appeared from nowhere was smaller than a Korthax escort vessel, but it was putting out energy readings that seemed impossible. No ship that size should be able to generate such massive power signatures. Then she watched it fire. The projectile that streaked past the raider ship moved faster than anything she had ever seen outside of stellar phenomena. When the mist shot struck a nearby asteroid, the explosion was so bright that her ship's cameras automatically darkened to protect the optical systems. By the sacred crystals, whispered Zindar from his communication station. What manner of beings command such terrible weapons? The answer came immediately in the form of a transmission that their universal translator struggled to process. The alien language was harsh and direct, with none of the flowery politeness that marked civilized communication between species. Unknown. Raider vessel. This is Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison of the United Earthship Valiant. You will immediately cease hostile actions and release your prisoners, or we will be forced to take direct action. The words were simple, but they carried an undertone of absolute confidence that sent chills down Vexithara's spine. Whoever these humans were, they clearly believed they could back up their threats with overwhelming force. The Korthax response was predictably violent. Vexthara watched through her cracked viewports as the raider ship turned its full arsenal toward the human vessel. Plasma cannons that had reduced her own ship to scrap fired everything they had at the newcomers. What happened next defied every law of physics that Vexithara understood. The human ship simply was not there anymore. It had moved with impossible speed and grace, dodging between energy bolts that should have been unavoidable. The vessel twisted and turned through space like a living creature dancing between raindrops. Then it struck back. The railgun rounds that hammered the Korthax ship moved so fast they were invisible to the naked eye. Vexithara only knew they had fired because of the devastating results. The raiders' weapons vanished in explosions of vaporized metal. The engines died in cascading, secondary blasts. The armor plating around the bridge peeled away like flower petals. In less than 30 seconds, the terror of the outer systems had been reduced to a powerless hulk drifting in space. Impossible, Zindar breathed. No one has ever defeated the Korthax so quickly. The Galactic Council has been trying to stop their raids for decades. Vexithara stared at the human ship as it hung motionless near the wreckage of their attacker. The vessel was clearly designed for war with angular lines and weapon ports that spoke of deadly purpose, but it had used its terrible power with surgical precision, destroying only what was necessary to end the threat. A new transmission reached them, and this time it was directed at her ship. Zelani vessel, this is Commander Morrison. We received your distress call and are here to assist. What is your current status? The captain looked around her damaged bridge. Emergency lights flickered in the smoke-filled air. Half her crew was dead or wounded. The ship's systems were failing one by one, but somehow they were alive and the Korthax were no longer a threat. Commander Morrison, this is Captain Vexithera of the research vessel Harmony's Light. We have multiple hull breaches and are losing atmosphere. Many of our crew are injured and in need of medical attention. Our engines are offline and we cannot maneuver. Understood, Captain. We are deploying emergency repair teams and medical personnel. Stand by for assistance. Within minutes, the human ship moved alongside the damaged Zelani vessel. Vexthara watched in amazement as airlocks extended and sealed against her ship's hull. The humans worked with incredible efficiency using tools and techniques that seemed centuries ahead of anything in the Galactic Council's databases. The first human to board her ship was a female in strange armor that seemed to move like a second skin. She carried medical equipment and moved with the confident stride of someone accustomed to emergency situations. "I am Dr. Susan Hayes," the human said through the translation device clipped to her armor. "I am here to help your wounded." Vexithara led the doctor to the emergency shelters where her surviving crew members were hiding. The Zilani were a delicate species with hollow bones and sensitive organs. They had evolved on a peaceful world with low gravity and gentle weather. Violence was completely foreign to their nature. Dr. Hayes immediately went to work on the most seriously injured crew members. Her hands moved with practiced skill as she used alien medical equipment to stabilize vital signs and repair damaged tissue. She worked without rest or complaint, treating everyone who needed help regardless of their species. "Your people are incredibly fragile," she told Vexithara as she finished treating a young engineer with broken ribs. "Your bone density is less than half of human normal, and your cardiovascular system seems designed for much lower stress environments. But with proper care, they should all recover fully." More humans arrived carrying repair equipment and supplies. They moved through the damaged ship like they had been doing this work for years. Atmospheric leaks were sealed. Power systems were restored. Structural damage was reinforced with metal patches that were stronger than the original hull plating. The team leader was a large male with graying hair and steady hands. He introduced himself as Chief Engineer Bill Carter and immediately began coordinating the repair efforts with quiet competence. "Your ship took a real beating," he told Vexithara as they watched his team work. "But the Korthax use pretty standard weapons. We have dealt with this kind of damage before in our own conflicts." "You have experience with raiders like them?" Vexithara asked. "Pirates are pirates regardless of what species they belong to," Carter replied with a shrug. "They all use the same basic tactics: attack the weak, avoid the strong, take what they want and run before anyone can stop them. And humans are strong enough to stop them." Carter looked at her with something that might have been surprise. "Ma'am, humans are strong enough to stop just about anything if we put our minds to it. That is what happens when you evolve on a world that is constantly trying to kill you." While the repairs continued, Commander Morrison came aboard to check on their progress. He was a tall man with dark hair and calm eyes that seemed to see everything around him. He moved with the easy confidence of someone who had faced danger many times and survived. "Captain Vexithara, I need to ask you some questions about the Korthax," he said. "How long have they been operating in this area? How many ships do they have? Where is their main base?" Vexithara answered as best she could, but her knowledge was limited. The Zilani were researchers and explorers, not military strategists. They knew the raiders existed, but they had always assumed the Galactic Council would eventually find a peaceful solution to the problem. "Commander, why do you ask these questions?" she finally said. Jake Morrison looked at her with those steady eyes and spoke in a voice that was completely matter-of-fact. "Because, ma'am, piracy is a crime against all civilized beings. These raiders have been terrorizing innocent people for years while your council talks about diplomatic solutions. That ends now." "What do you mean?" "I mean that the United Earth Navy takes a dim view of people who attack helpless civilians. We are going to hunt down every Korthax raider in this sector and put them out of business permanently." Vexithara stared at him in shock. No one had ever spoken about taking direct military action against the raiders. The very idea was alien to everything the Galactic Council represented. "But, Commander, what about negotiations? What about peaceful solutions? Surely there must be some way to resolve this conflict without more violence." Morrison's expression did not change, but something cold flashed in his eyes. "Captain, with all due respect, these pirates just tried to murder your entire crew. Some problems cannot be solved with words." Colonel Dan Phillips and his Marine squad moved through the captured Korthax ship like shadows in the night. Their powered armor made no sound as they advanced through the smoke-filled corridors. Each Marine carried weapons that could punch through tank armor and had been trained to fight in the worst conditions imaginable. The Korthax raiders who were still alive offered almost no resistance. Most of them were too shocked by their devastating defeat to even think about fighting back. Those who did try to resist discovered that human soldiers were even more terrifying up close than their ships were at long range. "Sector 7 clear," reported Sergeant Kelly Brooks over the radio. "Found 12 more raiders hiding in the cargo hold. They surrendered as soon as they saw us coming." Copy that, Kelly, Dan replied as he zip-tied another prisoner. These pirates are not used to dealing with people who shoot back effectively. The Korthax had built their entire strategy around attacking victims who could not defend themselves. Merchant ships with minimal weapons, research vessels with no armor, colony, transports full of civilians. They had never faced an enemy that was better armed and trained than they were. Now they were learning what it felt like to be the helpless ones. Dan found Captain Grackmore on the bridge sitting in his command chair and staring at nothing. The big alien's gray skin was pale with shock and his hands shook whenever he tried to move them. Half his crew was dead and the other half was in human custody. You are the leader of this ship, Dan said through his translator. Grackmore looked up at the human soldier with eyes full of fear and confusion. The Marine's armor made him look like a mechanical demon, and his weapons could probably destroy the entire bridge with a single shot. Yes, the Korthax captain whispered. I am Grackmore, commander of the Bloodfang. How many other raider ships are operating in this sector? Dan asked in a voice that was calm but somehow terrifying. I will not tell you anything. Grackmore tried to sound defiant, but his voice cracked with terror. Dan studied the alien for a moment. He had interrogated pirates before during the Outer Colony Wars. They were all the same regardless of what species they belonged to. Bullies and cowards who only acted tough when they thought they had the advantage. Captain, let me explain something to you, Dan said, as he sat down in a chair across from the prisoner. My people have been fighting wars for thousands of years. We are very good at getting information from captured enemies. We can do this the easy way or the hard way, but we will get our answers either way. The Marine's tone was conversational, but Grackmore could hear the promise of pain hidden underneath the words. These humans were predators just like the Korthax, but they were clearly much better at it. There are 6 raider ships in our fleet, he said quickly. They are based at the asteroid field in the Kepler system. We were supposed to meet there in 5 days to divide the loot from this raid. Good, Dan said as he made notes on his tactical computer. What kind of weapons and defenses do they have? Within an hour, the Marines had secured the entire raider ship and gathered intelligence on the complete Korthax operation. The pirates had been running their criminal enterprise for years without serious opposition. They had grown lazy and careless, believing that no one in the galaxy could threaten them. That belief was about to cost them everything. Back on the Valiant, Dr. Susan Hayes worked frantically to save the injured Zilani crew members. The aliens were incredibly fragile compared to humans with bones that broke easily and organs that could be damaged by minor impacts. But they were also remarkably responsive to treatment once she figured out their basic physiology. Their cellular structure is fascinating, she told Commander Morrison as they walked through the temporary medical ward. They seem to have evolved for a world with very low-stress environments. No predators, no extreme weather. Plenty of food and water for everyone. Sounds like paradise, Jake replied. It also makes them completely unprepared for violence. Susan continued. Their nervous systems go into shock at the first sign of physical trauma. It's like their bodies just were not designed to handle conflict or pain. Jake nodded as he watched the Zilani patients recovering in their beds. Most of them were awake now, but they still flinched whenever a human came near them. Not because the humans had hurt them, but because every instinct in their bodies screamed that predators were dangerous. How are they responding to our presence? He asked. Mixed reactions, Susan admitted. They are grateful for our help, but they are also terrified of us. I think we remind them of something their species has been avoiding for millions of years. Captain Vexithara approached them slowly and carefully. She had been studying the humans for hours, trying to understand what kind of beings would risk their lives for complete strangers. Her scientific mind was fascinated, but her survival instincts were screaming warnings. Commander Morrison, I must ask you something, she said in her soft musical voice. What kind of world created your species? Jake considered the question carefully. How do you explain Earth to someone whose evolution had been shaped by peace and abundance? How do you describe a planet where survival meant becoming the deadliest thing in your environment? We call it Earth, he said simply. Most galactic classification systems would probably label it a death world. High gravity, violent weather, aggressive predator species, limited resources. Everything on our planet competes for survival, and only the strongest and smartest make it to adulthood. And yet your people's response to a distress call from strangers was to immediately travel across space to help us. Vexithara said with wonder in her voice. That is what people do, Jake replied with a shrug. Someone needs help, so you help them. The fact that you are not human does not make you less deserving of assistance. The Zilani captain stared at him for a long moment, trying to reconcile the deadly efficiency she had witnessed with the casual compassion in his words. These humans had destroyed a Korthax raider in seconds, but they had also worked for hours to save alien lives without asking for anything in return. Commander, I must warn you about something, she said finally. When word of this incident reaches the Galactic Council, there will be questions. Many species have wondered about your people since we became aware of your existence. Today's events will not ease their concerns. Jake smiled grimly. He had been expecting this conversation since the moment they decided to intervene. First contact with alien civilizations was supposed to be handled by diplomats and scientists, not military officers responding to emergency calls. Captain, with respect, we have been wondering about you folks too, he said. The galaxy has been awfully quiet since we started reaching for the stars. Now we know why. What do you mean? I mean that most of the species out here seem to be pacifists, who have forgotten how to defend themselves. That makes the galaxy a perfect hunting ground for predators like the Korthax. Vexithara felt a chill run down her spine. The human was right, of course. The Galactic Council had spent so much time avoiding conflict that they had become helpless against those who embraced it. And what do humans intend to do about this problem? She asked. Jake looked at her with those calm, steady eyes that seemed to see everything. Ma'am, we intend to remind the galaxy that predators are not the only dangerous things in the universe. Sometimes you need monsters to fight monsters. The Zilani captain realized that first contact between humanity and the galactic community was going to change everything. The age of peaceful coexistence was ending, and something much more complicated was about to begin. She was not sure if that was a good thing or a terrible thing, but she knew it was inevitable. 3 weeks after the rescue of the Harmony's light, the emergency session of the Galactic Council convened on the neutral world of Axiom Prime. The massive assembly hall buzzed with nervous energy as representatives from dozens of species debated the implications of first contact with humanity. High Counselor Mordak of the Vorthak Peacekeeping Union stood at the central podium. He was a tall, thin being with green skin and large, peaceful eyes. His species had evolved from plant-eating herd animals, and they believed that all conflicts could be resolved through patient discussion and compromise. Fellow counselors, we are here to address a most disturbing development, he announced in his calm, melodious voice. 3 weeks ago, an unknown species calling themselves humans intervened in a piracy incident in the Outer Rim territories. Their actions, while successful in stopping the immediate threat, have raised serious concerns about galactic security. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the assembly. Most of the council members were from peaceful species who had never known war. The idea of solving problems with overwhelming violence was alien and frightening to them. The incident reports make for difficult reading, continued Counselor Felnara of the Zilani Research Collective. A single human vessel defeated a fully armed Korthax raider in less than 30 seconds. Their weapons technology appears to be centuries ahead of our own defensive capabilities. She activated a holographic display showing the tactical analysis of the battle. The assembled delegates watched in stunned silence as the human ship moved with impossible speed and precision. The destruction of the raider vessel was so quick and efficient that many species representatives had trouble believing it was real. More troubling still is their psychology, added Counselor Yintar of the Peaceful Harmony Alliance. According to Captain Vexithara's testimony, they risked their lives for complete strangers without hesitation or negotiation. Such behavior suggests a species that is either incredibly altruistic or incredibly dangerous. Why not both? Asked a new voice from the gallery entrance. The entire assembly fell silent as Ambassador Lisa Chang walked into the hall. She was the first human diplomatic representative to officially contact the Galactic Council. Earth had decided to send someone with experience in hostile negotiations, and Lisa had personally ended 3 separate colonial wars through a combination of diplomacy and implied threats. She was a small woman with dark hair and intelligent eyes, but she moved with the confident stride of someone who had faced down armed rebels and corporate armies. The alien delegates watched her approach with mixtures of curiosity and barely concealed fear. Honored counselors, Lisa began as she took her place at the speaker's podium. I have come to address your concerns about humanity's place in galactic society. My name is Lisa Chung, and I represent the United Earth government in all diplomatic matters. The translation systems worked overtime to convert her words into dozens of different languages. Most species had never heard human speech before, and many found the harsh, direct tones unsettling compared to their own musical communications. Yes, my people are capable of tremendous violence when threatened or when innocents are endangered, she continued. We evolved on a world that taught us to be strong and to protect those who cannot protect themselves. But we are equally capable of tremendous compassion, sacrifice, and cooperation. She activated her own holographic display showing images from Earth. Cities full of art and culture, families enjoying peaceful moments together, children playing in parks under alien skies, scientists working to cure diseases and explore the universe. We come from a dangerous world, but we chose to use our strength to build rather than to destroy. The Korthax raiders learned this lesson when they threatened innocent people. We hope the rest of the galaxy will learn it as well. High Counselor Mordak leaned forward in his chair. His large eyes showed both curiosity and concern as he studied the human ambassador. And what does humanity want from the galaxy, Ambassador Chang? He asked carefully. Lisa smiled, and her expression was genuinely warm despite the tension in the room. The same thing most people want, Counselor. Friends, trade partners, and the chance to help make the galaxy a little bit safer for everyone. The universe is dangerous enough without adding unnecessary threats. But your species seems to specialize in creating those very threats, interrupted Counselor Zekvar of the Gentle Stream Confederation. Your weapons could destroy entire fleets. Your soldiers could conquer peaceful worlds. How can we trust beings with such terrible capabilities? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Lisa looked around the assembly hall at the hundreds of alien faces watching her. Most showed fear or suspicion. A few showed curiosity. None showed the kind of welcome that humanity had hoped for. Counselor, you make an excellent point, she said finally. Humans are indeed capable of conquest and destruction on a massive scale. We have the technology and the military experience to take whatever we want from any species in this galaxy. Gasps of shock echoed through the chamber. Several delegates began talking urgently among themselves. This was exactly what they had feared to hear. But, Lisa continued, raising her voice to regain their attention, we are not here as conquerors. We are here as potential allies and friends. The Zelani sent out a distress call asking for help. They got the wrong frequency and reached a species of Deathworlders instead of their intended peacekeepers. But they still got help, did they not? She paused to let her words sink in before delivering her final point. Maybe it is time the galaxy reconsidered what kind of neighbors it really wants. You have spent centuries building a civilization based on peace and cooperation. That is admirable, and we respect it greatly. But what happens when something comes along that cannot be reasoned with or negotiated with? The Galactic Council has always found peaceful solutions to our problems, Mordak replied with dignity. Really? Lisa asked. Then why have the Korthax been raiding your shipping lanes for decades? Why are there still pirate fleets operating in systems under Council protection? Why do your own security reports list dozens of hostile species that your peacekeepers cannot control? The hall fell completely silent. Every delegate knew she was right, but none wanted to admit it out loud. The Council's peaceful approach worked well for conflicts between civilized species, but it was useless against those who rejected civilization entirely. You want to know what humans want from the galaxy? Lisa said into the silence. We want to help you solve the problems that words cannot fix. We want to be the sword that protects the hand that builds. We want to make sure that when the real monsters finally come calling from the dark between stars, you have some monsters of your own standing ready to fight them. The vote to grant humanity provisional membership in the Galactic Council was closer than anyone expected. Many species voted against the proposal out of fear and mistrust, but others remembered their own encounters with pirates and raiders and criminals that the peacekeepers could not stop. As news of the vote spread through the outer systems, the reaction was immediate and dramatic. Merchant ships began requesting human escorts for dangerous routes. Colony worlds asked for defense treaties. Even some council species quietly reached out to discuss security arrangements. The galaxy was changing whether the politicians liked it or not. After millions of years of peace and gentle civilization, the universe was about to remember what it meant to have guardians who were willing to fight.